The family traveled back to Des Moines for the funeral. Standing in the middle of a vast cornfield under a sky that felt too big, Jack watched Janet. She looked small against the horizon, a successful city woman returning to the soil that made her. "He never did like my seasonings, did he?" Jack whispered as they stood by the grave after the service. Janet leaned her head on his shoulder, her eyes red but steady. "He loved you, Jack. He just didn't want to admit that a boy from California could make a better pot of coffee than he could." The trip to Iowa reminded them of where they came from. It reminded them that before the restaurants and the boutiques, they were just two kids in a crowded apartment trying to figure out how to be brave. Chapter 36. The Secret in the Shag. When they returned to Santa Monica, they found a letter waiting for them. The building that housed Apartment 201 was being designated as a historical landmark thanks to the petition Jack had led years ago. However, the designation required an official architectural survey. During the survey, the workers discovered something behind a loose panel in the hallway of their old apartment. Ralph Furley, now living in a retirement community but still possessing his keys, called them immediately. "Jack, Janet, you won't believe it. We found a treasure." They met Ralph at the building. He was wearing a tracksuit that was surprisingly muted, a sign of the times, perhaps, but his excitement was as loud as ever. He handed Jack a weathered metal box. Inside wasn't gold or jewels. It was a collection of letters and a journal dating back to the late 1940s. It belonged to the original builder of the complex, a man who had returned from the war with a dream of creating a sanctuary for people who didn't quite fit in. One entry caught Janet's eye. "Building the 3rd floor today. I want these rooms to be light. I want them to be places where people can start over, where a man can be a friend to a woman without the world pointing fingers." "He built it for us," Janet whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Even before we were born, he knew we'd need a place like this." The discovery made headlines. The story of the Three's Company apartment became a symbol of a lost era of innocence and unconventional family. David Vance, now a disgraced former developer, tried to claim the journal for his memoirs, but Jack and Janet donated it to the Santa Monica Historical Society. Chapter 37. The Prodigal Cowboy Returns. Just as JJ was preparing to head off on a tour of Pacific Northwest dive bars, a familiar rumble echoed in the driveway. A dusty pickup truck with Texas plates pulled in. Out stepped Tex Tripper. He looked older, his face a map of sun and wind, but his Stetson was still perfectly creased. "Heard the young'un was thinking about leaving the herd," Tex drawled, leaning against his truck. Tex stayed for a month. He didn't talk much about music, but he taught JJ how to fix the van's engine with nothing but a pair of pliers and a prayer. He took Lily out to the pier and showed her how to read the tides. One night, sitting on the porch with Jack, Tex handed him a small, carved wooden toad frog. "Austin's retired," Tex said, a rare twinkle in his eye. "But he wanted you to have this, for the times you had to be him, so you could finally be yourself." Jack looked at the little frog, remembering the mole, the eyeliner, and the way he had stumbled through his first howdy. "I think I'm done with the disguises, Tex," Jack said, smiling. "You were always a better cook than a cowboy, Jack," Tex chuckled, patting his cousin's back. "But you had the heart of a wrangler. You held on to what mattered." Chapter 38. The Grand Reunion. To celebrate the building's landmark status and their 25th anniversary, Jack and Janet organized a party at the Regal Beagle. They rented out the entire place. Cindy flew in from New York, where she was now a high-powered executive assistant to a Broadway producer. Larry was there, of course, looking distinguished with a touch of gray at his temples, still trying to sell insurance to anyone who stood still for too long. The highlight of the evening was when Mr. Furley took the stage. He was 80 now, but when the music started a remix of an old disco hit, he did a shimmy that brought the house down. "To the Trippers!" Larry shouted, raising a glass of the good wine. "The best long con in history." "It wasn't a con, Larry," Jack said, pulling Janet close. "It was just a long way home." They danced on the same floor where they had once hidden from landlords and brothers. They laughed about the Spanish lessons and the chocolate soufflés. And for a moment, the 90s faded away, and it was 1979. Again the air smelled of salt, The lights were neon, and they were young, clumsy, and entirely in love. Chapter 39. The Legacy of Apartment 201. As the party wound down, Jack and Janet walked back to the apartment building. It was quiet now. The new tenants, a group of young tech students, were out for the night. They stood in the hallway, looking at the door of 201. "Do you think they know?" Janet asked. "Know what? How much life happened behind that door. How many lies we told just so we could tell the truth." Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. He didn't use it. He just held it. "They'll have their own stories, January, their own Austins, and their own David Vances, but the walls will keep our secrets." They walked down the stairs, hand in hand. Outside, the Santa Monica fog was rolling in, thick and cool, just like it had been on the night they first realized that 3 was the most beautiful company in the world. And as the golden sun of a new decade prepared to rise over the Pacific, the cook and the florist drove home, leaving behind a legacy of laughter, a landmark of love, and the enduring spirit of a cowboy who never really existed, but who had changed everything. Chapter 40. The Digital Tide. The year 2005 arrived with the hum of the internet and the glow of early smartphones. Santa Monica was no longer the sleepy coastal town of the disco era. It was a tech hub, a playground for the young and the connected. For Jack Tripper, the change was most visible in his kitchen. Tripper's was still a landmark, but the customers were now more likely to be photographing their food than eating it. "They're calling it gastronomy, Janet," Jack grumbled one morning, scrolling through a review site on his computer. "They want foams and spherification. I just want to make a damn good roast chicken." Janet, who had successfully transitioned Wood and Petals into a high-end floral design firm with a thriving online presence, laughed. She was still elegant, her hair now a sophisticated silver that caught the light of their hilltop home. "Adapt or die, Jack. That's what you told me when I didn't want to buy that delivery van from Larry," she reminded him. But the greatest adaptation was happening within their family. He was no longer the grunge drummer. He was a serious, disciplined professional, though he still wore his father's old Stetson hat in the kitchen for luck. Lily, however, was the one who stayed close. She had taken over the daily operations of Wood and Petals, and she possessed a business acumen that Janet often marveled at. "It's not just about the flowers, Mom," Lily would say. "It's about the experience. It's about the truth behind the gesture. The truth." It was a word that still echoed in the Tripper household. Chapter 41. A Final Curtain for a King. The phone call came in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. Ralph Furley had passed away at the age of 91, peacefully, in his sleep. His funeral was the largest gathering Santa Monica had seen in years. It wasn't just friends and family, it was hundreds of former tenants, neighborhood characters, and even a few city council members. The service was held at the historical apartment building, in the very lobby where Ralph had once paced in his bruised plum leisure suits. Jack gave the eulogy. He stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of people who had been part of their lives for nearly 30 years. He thought about the man who was both their greatest obstacle and their most loyal protector. Ralph Furley was a man of many colors, Jack said, a tear catching in his eye. Most of them polyester. He was paranoid, he was neurotic, and he was undeniably, completely human. He saw the world not as it was, but as it could be a place of drama, comedy, and connection. He gave us a home when we had nowhere else to go, and he gave us a family when we didn't even know we were looking for one. After the service, Jack and Janet walked through the empty apartment 201 one last time. The Historical Society had turned it into a small museum, preserving the shag carpeting and the wicker furniture as a tribute to the era. "He'd love this," Janet whispered, touching the arm of the love seat. "Being a museum piece. He always thought he was a legend." "He was, Jack said, pulling her close, "in all the ways that matter." Chapter 42. The Austin Inheritance. A few months after Ralph's funeral, a young man appeared at the bistro. He was tall, wearing a worn Stetson hat and boots that had seen real dust. He had a familiar drawl and a mole on his cheek. "I'm looking for Jack Tripper," the young man said. Jack, who was now mostly in the office rather than on the line, came out to meet him. He felt a strange sense of déjà vu. "I'm Jack. Can I help you?" "My name's Cody." "Cody Snow," the young man said, grinning. "Cindy's my mom. She told me if I ever got lost in California, I should look for the man who taught her how to dance." Cindy's son. Cindy had married a rancher in upstate New York years ago, a man who was, ironically, as rugged as the fake Austin. Cody stayed with them for the summer, working in the bistro's kitchen. He was a natural, clumsy like Jack, but with a heart of gold. He became the bridge between the generations, listening to Jack's stories of the 70s and telling them about the world of the 21st century. One night, after a busy shift, Cody found the old wooden-toed frog Tex had given Jack years before. "What's this, Jack?" he asked. Jack smiled, picking up the small carving. "That's the Austin inheritance, Cody. It's a reminder that sometimes you have to be a cowboy to find out you're actually a cook, and sometimes you have to tell a lie so the truth has a place to grow." Chapter 43. The Eternal Rendezvous.